Hello and welcome to the first video in my series on music theory for the guitar. The theoretical concepts that I'll talk about apply to any instrument, but I will apply them to the guitar so that you can recognize the patterns and the conventions of Western music. Oftentimes, guitarists don't understand theory as well as our counterparts on the piano, the violin, and other Western musical instruments. And there are some reasons for that. However, it doesn't have to be this way. At the same time, there are many great musicians who don't understand or haven't studied any musical theory at all. And that's valid for those people. However, musical theory makes it much easier to recognize patterns and conventions that are used in music, apply them to your own playing, your own improvisation and composition. Remember the songs that you learn better, write your own charts, transcribe music that you hear, and communicate concepts to others. In this first lesson, I'm going to introduce major scales, intervals, triads, and inversions. Now, the first major scale that I'm going to introduce today is the C major scale. So I'll start on C, on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, and I'll play upwards to the C on the 1st fret of the 2nd string. So you have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Now that series of notes followed a pattern known as a major scale. A major scale is a pattern in which you begin on one note and then you select notes in the following order. You start at a note, you go up 2 frets, or you cross onto another string if necessary, but the shape is up 2 frets, to the next note is 2 more frets, to the next note is 1 fret, 2 frets, 2 frets, 2 frets, and then 1 fret. The interval of 1 fret is called a semitone, and the interval of 2 frets is called a tone. So the C major scale, or any major scale, follows the shape of tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. I'm playing it on one string so that you can see the intervals in a simple way. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And those notes again are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So we talked about the intervals from each note in the scale to the next note up. Tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. But let's look at the intervals between the first note in the scale and each note. So we're looking at the interval between the first note, the root note, and the second note, first note and the third note, the first note and the fourth note. Those intervals have names. So to begin with, from C, the root note of the scale, to C, the root note of the scale, the same note, that's called a perfect unison. Sometimes you may have 2 notes that are the same note, but you play them simultaneously. That's called a perfect unison. Now, from the C to the second note in the scale, D, that's called a major second. And those 2 notes are 2 frets apart, 2 semitones apart, major second. From the root note to the third note in the major scale, that interval is called a major third. Root to third, major third. To the fourth note, that is called a perfect fourth. From the root to the fifth note in the scale. That is called a perfect fifth. From the root note to the sixth note in the major scale. That's called a major sixth. From the root note to the seventh note in the scale. That's called a major seventh. And from the root note all the way up the scale to the root note again, that's called a perfect octave. Now, perfect unison, that's 0 frets apart, or 0 semitones apart. Major second, that's 2 frets, or 2 semitones apart. Major third is 4 semitones apart, or 4 frets apart. 1, 2, 3, 4. Perfect fourth is 5 semitones apart. Perfect fifth is 7 semitones apart. Major sixth is 9 semitones apart. A major seventh is 11 frets apart. And a perfect octave is 12 frets apart. So because an octave is 12 frets apart, each string on the guitar, so that's an E on the 6th string. If you fret the 12th fret, that's also an E. So now that we've looked at the C major scale, we've looked at the intervals from the root in the C major scale. Now let's look at the C major triad. Now a major triad is based on the major scale. So the C major triad has a C in it. It has the third note in the C major scale in it, which is an E. So we've got the root, the third, and it has the fifth note of the C major scale in it, G. C, E, G, or you can think of it as 1, 3, 5 in that major scale. So the intervals in this triad are obviously from the 1 to the 3, that's a major third. From the 1 to the 5 is a perfect fifth. From the 3 to the 5 is what's called a minor third, which we'll get to later. That's a C major triad. But that's only one of the many ways that you can play a C major triad. All C major triads have C, E, and G in them, but sometimes, as in this one, the C's at the bottom, the root note's at the bottom, the third's in the middle, the fifth is at the top. Sometimes we have it arranged that way, and that's called a root position major triad. 1 at the bottom, 3 in the middle, 5 at the top. But you can also have what's called a first inversion, and that's when we take the root note from the bottom and we move it up to the top. So instead of the C being down here, we play this C up here. So now we've got E the third at the bottom, G the fifth in the middle, and C the root at the top. And we also have what's called a second inversion major triad, and that's when you've got the fifth at the bottom, the first or the root in the middle, and the third at the top. So it's still C, E, and G, but it's just G at the bottom, C in the middle, and E at the top. So let's look at the lowest C major triad that you can get on the guitar, and that is G at the bottom, C in the middle, E at the top, second inversion C major triad, root position C major triad, first inversion C major triad, second inversion C major triad. position C major triad. To learn your C major triads in every position over the guitar neck, a good exercise is to look at each string set. So each set of 3 adjacent strings, 6, 5, 4, or 5, 4, 3, or 4, 3, 2, or 3, 2, 1. We'll look at all of the inversions of the C major scale on each of those sets of 3 strings. So, starting with 6, 5, 4, we've got a C major second inversion triad. We've got a C major root position triad here. We've got a C major first inversion triad here. And we've got a C major second inversion triad here. On string set 5, 4, 3, we've got a root position triad here. C, E, G. We've got first inversion C major triad here. 3, 5, 1, E, G, C. We've got a second inversion C major triad here. 5, 1, 3, G, C, E. String set 4, 3, 2. We've got a first inversion C major triad down here. We've got a second inversion C major triad here. We've got a root position C major triad here. I'm not going all the way to the top on all of them because I'm playing the acoustic, but you can continue these patterns up higher on the neck. On string set 3, 2, 1, second inversion C major triad, G, C, E, 5, 1, 3, root position C major triad, C, E, G, 1, 3, 5, first inversion C major triad, and back at the second inversion C major triad. Now notice that when you go 12 frets up from any chord shape, it's the same name for that chord shape, 12 frets up, because it's 1 octave up. Second inversion C major triad, second inversion C major triad. Now we've looked at these triads, these intervals, and the major scale in C, just to demonstrate that the same thing applies to any root note. I'll do the same thing in G. The G major scale starts on G, on the 3rd fret of the 6th string. That's the root note, G. Now the second scale degree is A, 3rd is B, 4th is C, 5th is D, 6th is E, 7th is F sharp, and the first again, or the root, is G. Now notice that the key of G major has an F sharp in it. Every different key has different sharps or flats in it. You'll learn about that later on. So if we look at the intervals of those scale degrees from the root, it follows the same pattern as C major. Now the intervals of the root and each scale degree of the G major scale are as follows. The G, which is the root, to the G, which is the root, is a perfect unison. The G, root, and the A, which is the second note in the G major scale, is a major second. The interval between the root and the 3rd note in the G major scale, G and B, is a major third. The interval between the root and the 4th, which is C, is a perfect 4th. The interval between G, the root, and D, the 5th note in the G major scale, is a perfect 5th. The interval between G, the root, sixth note in the G major scale is a major 6. The interval between G the root and F sharp, the 7th note in the G major scale, is a major 7th. And finally, the interval between G, the root note, and the top G, which is also the root note, is perfect octave. So you'll see the pattern was exactly the same as with the C major scale, it's just the note names were different. Instead of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, it was G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So the major scale is the pattern or the shape that can start on any note. It will always be tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, counting up from the root note. And just like with the C major triad, the G major triad starts with the root of the G major scale, the third of the G major scale, and the fifth of the G major scale. So a G major triad is G, B, D. Just like with the C major triad, you have inversions of the G major triad. You have G, B, D, which is root position. You have B, D, G, third, fifth root, third, fifth root, which is the first inversion. You have D, G, B, which is the second inversion. You have G, B, D again, which is the root position again. And you have B, D, G, which is the first inversion again. Now let's take those inversions all over the guitar neck, starting on the 6-5-4 string grouping. G, B, D is the root position G major triad. B, D, G is the first inversion of the G major triad. And D, G, B is the second inversion of the G major triad. On string set 5-4-3, B, D, G is the first inversion of the G major triad. D, G, B is the second inversion of the G major triad. And then G, B, D is the root position of the G major triad. On string set 4-3-2, D, G, B is the second inversion of the G major triad. G, B, D is the root position of the G major triad. B, D, G is the first inversion of the G major triad. The second inversion up on the 12th fret. So remember, open string, 12th fret are the same note names, just up an octave. So second inversion G major triad, second inversion G major triad, it's the same, just up an octave. Now string set 3-2-1. B, D, G is the first inversion of the G major triad. D, G, B is the second inversion of the G major triad. And G, B, D is the root position of the G major triad. Now that we've had a little look at all the different inversions of major triads on the guitar neck, you can take that and you can apply it to all 12 keys. So you can apply it to C major, G major, D major, A major, E major, B major, G flat major, D flat major, A flat major, E flat major, B flat major, F major. And then when we look at minor scales, minor triads, minor intervals, you can do the exact same routine going around all the necking, all the different keys. It's not that important to do every single key, but it's good to do a few different keys, to look at a few different songs and identify what key they're in, identify the chords, the triads and the voicings that you see. Because when you identify them in context, they become real to you. Learning theory, in and of itself, it doesn't make you musical. However, it makes it much easier to recognize patterns in music, memorize songs, read charts, improvise, communicate musical ideas to other people, transcribe music that you hear, and compose your own music.